The war between Michael Donovan and Barbara Whitfield began as most suburban feuds do, with something seemingly insignificant: a splash of water, a burst of laughter carried on a summer breeze, the clink of glasses as friends toasted under string lights that, according to Barbara, violated the neighborhood's light pollution guidelines. Michael hadn't expected any trouble when he purchased the modest ranch-style home on Oakwood Lane 3 years ago. At 42, recently divorced and looking for a fresh start, he'd been drawn to the tree-lined street and its promising sense of community. The backyard pool, small but well-maintained by the previous owners, had sealed the deal. After years of working 60-hour weeks at his architectural firm, he'd envisioned lazy weekends spent floating in cerulean waters, hosting occasional gatherings for friends and coworkers. Barbara Whitfield, however, had other ideas about how residents of Oakwood Lane should conduct themselves. "Excuse me," she'd said the first time they met, clipboard in hand and pearls gleaming at her throat despite the July heat. "I'm the president of the Oakwood Homeowners Association. I don't believe we discussed your plans for that swimming area." Michael had been in the middle of unloading groceries from his car, sweat beading on his forehead. "The pool was here when I bought the place." Barbara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, well, we've had some complaints about noise coming from your property on weekends. Perhaps you weren't aware of our community guidelines regarding outdoor entertainment." He hadn't been because no such formal guidelines existed. A fact he would discover after 3 hours of searching through the HOA documentation that night. But Barbara, call me Barb, she insisted to everyone except Michael, operated on implications and social pressure rather than actual rules. That first confrontation had blossomed into a campaign. No pool party went unmonitored. No weekend gathering escaped her scrutiny. Barbara's bay window offered a perfect vantage point for surveillance, and her phone was always ready to capture any perceived infraction. "Your guest parked 4 inches over the sidewalk line," she would text. "Your music could be heard from my kitchen," she would email. "Those floats are an eyesore from the street," she would announce, appearing in his fence like an apparition in pastel linen. By the summer of his second year, Michael had reduced his pool parties to once a month, subdued affairs that ended promptly at 9 p.m. His friends jokingly referred to these gatherings as whisper swims. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was Memorial Day weekend, and Michael had invited his sister's family, including his 2 young nieces, who shrieked with delight as they cannonballed into the water. He'd been grilling burgers when Barbara materialized at the fence line. Phone pointed toward the pool. "I'm documenting these noise violations," she announced. "Those children are disturbing the entire neighborhood." Something in Michael snapped. Perhaps it was the way his youngest niece's face fell, her joy instantly extinguished. Perhaps it was the realization that he'd allowed this woman to shrink his life into something small and apologetic. "Their kids swimming in a pool on a holiday weekend, Barbara," he said, setting down his spatula. "Kids? Swimming? At 4 in the afternoon." Barbara's nostrils flared. "The HOA will be hearing about this." "There's nothing in the HOA regulations about children swimming," Michael replied, a plan already forming in his mind. "But if the pool is such an issue, maybe I should consider some alternatives." He smiled then with genuine warmth that seemed to unsettle Barbara more than anger would have. "Enjoy your holiday, Barbara," he added, turning back to his grill. "It's going to be a very interesting summer." The following weekend, Michael sat at his kitchen table surrounded by architectural drafting paper, colored pencils, and 3 empty coffee mugs. As a mid-level architect at Turner & Associates, he spent his days designing practical office spaces and occasional residential additions. But now his professional skills were being channeled into something far more personal and admittedly petty. "This is either the most ridiculous thing I've ever done," he muttered to himself, "or the most brilliant." His phone buzzed with a text from his best friend, Derek. "Still on for helping me move that old shed tomorrow?" Michael glanced at his sketches, calculations, and the increasingly detailed plan taking shape before him. He sent back a quick reply. "Actually, I need your help with something else. Bring more gloves. And maybe Ryan, too. I'll explain when you get here." Derek and Ryan arrived early Sunday morning, bleary-eyed but curious about the urgency in Michael's request. They stood in the backyard, coffee mugs in hand, as Michael unveiled his plans. "Let me get this straight," Derek said, squinting at the sketches. "You want to turn your backyard into a beach." "Not just a beach," Michael corrected. "A beach resort. With sand, palm trees, tiki torches, a bar, cabanas, the works." Ryan walked the perimeter of the yard, measuring with his eyes. "And this is all because the HOA lady has a problem with your pool." "Barbara," Michael clarified. "And yes, she claims the pool parties are destructive, but there's nothing in the HOA guidelines about landscaping transformations. I checked. Twice." Derek took another sip of coffee. "You know this is insane, right? Probably, Michael agreed, but I've spent 2 years trying to be a reasonable neighbor. I've reduced parties, lowered music, sent out parking instructions to guests. Nothing satisfies her. He gestured toward Barbara's house, visible through the trees. Last week, she complained about children laughing direct. Children. My nieces. Ryan nodded slowly. So if you can't use your pool in peace. I eliminate the pool while Michael finished and create something even better. The three men spent the day taking measurements, making supply lists, and researching suppliers. By sunset, they had a timeline. 6 weekends to transform the yard. Michael would handle the design and permits. Derek, who managed a construction crew, would coordinate the heavy lifting. Ryan, whose brother owned a landscaping business, would secure plants and materials at cost. The following Saturday, Phase 1 began. The pool was drained, a process that brought Barbara to her bay window so frequently that Michael wondered if she'd installed a surveillance camera. By mid-afternoon, a small digger arrived to expand the pool area, removing the concrete surround and digging a larger, more organic-shaped footprint. Barbara didn't waste any time. At precisely 3:42 p.m., as the digger was creating the first expansion, her sharp knock rapped against Michael's front door. "You're performing major excavation without HOA approval," she announced when he opened the door, not bothering with a greeting. Today, she wore a salmon-colored cardigan despite the heat, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun that seemed to stretch her features into perpetual disapproval. Michael leaned against the doorframe. "Actually, Barbara, I'm making landscape improvements, which according to HOA bylaws section 5, paragraph C, only requires notification, not approval. I submitted my notification form last Tuesday." He smiled. "Would you like a copy? I made extras." He watched as she processed this information, her mouth twitching slightly at the corners. Barbara Whitfield was many things, but unintelligent wasn't one of them. She recognized when someone had done their homework. "What exactly are you building?" she demanded. "I'm improving my outdoor living space," Michael replied, the deliberately vague phrase taken directly from the HOA guidelines, "making it more natural." The digger engine roared to life again, drawing both their attention to the backyard. "This isn't over," Barbara warned, turning to leave. "Disruption of community aesthetics is grounds for review." "Have a wonderful afternoon," Michael called after her. "I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of each other in the coming weeks." As she marched back to her house, Michael pulled out his phone and texted Derek. She took the bait. Time for Phase 2. "How fast can you get those palm trees here?" Their reply came almost instantly. "Truck's already scheduled for Wednesday. This is going to be epic." Michael looked up at Barbara's house, where she now stood at her window, phone in hand, undoubtedly photographing every move of the digger. For the first time in months, he felt a surge of genuine excitement. Summer was about to get very interesting on Oakwood Lane. The Oakwood Lane Homeowners Association normally met in the beige-walled community room of the local library, a space as bland and uninspiring as most of their discussions about fence heights and approved mailbox colors. But tonight's emergency meeting had drawn such unexpected attendance that they'd been forced to relocate to the elementary school gymnasium. Michael arrived 15 minutes early with Derek and Ryan flanking him like consigliere. They found Barbara already at the front of the room, arranging photos of Michael's backyard on a presentation board, her face set in grim determination. The 5 other HOA board members huddled nearby, looking simultaneously concerned and uncomfortable with the growing crowd. "I count at least 60 people," Ryan murmured, scanning the room. "That's got to be a record for an HOA meeting." 72, Michael corrected. "And more coming in." "Did you notice how many are wearing Hawaiian shirts?" Indeed, a surprising number of attendees had arrived in tropical attire, a silent but unmistakable show of support that clearly had Barbara rattled. Michael spotted Cynthia Miller distributing what appeared to be homemade cookies shaped like palm trees. At precisely 7:00 p.m., Barbara called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of her gavel. "We are gathered to address an urgent matter of community concern," she announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly hushed gymnasium. "As many of you have witnessed, one of our residents has undertaken a radical alteration of his property that threatens the aesthetic harmony and property values of Oakwood Lane." She gestured dramatically toward her display board of photos. These images speak for themselves. What was once a tasteful swimming pool has been transformed into what can only be described as a garish tourist attraction. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but not the indignant one Barbara had clearly anticipated. Several people were nodding appreciatively at the photos. "Before we proceed with a vote on enforcement action," Barbara continued, "the board will allow the homeowner in question 5 minutes to explain his actions." Michael approached the podium calmly, carrying a slim portfolio. He placed it on the lectern, opened it, and looked out at his neighbors with a warm smile that contrasted sharply with Barbara's tight-lipped severity. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. I understand change can be concerning, especially when it happens quickly. I'd like to explain not just what I'm doing with my property, why. He clicked a small remote, activating a projector that Ryan had set up earlier. The first slide showed Michael's backyard as it had been 2 weeks ago. Ordinary, unremarkable. For the past 2 years, I've tried to use my modest pool area to build community connections. I invited neighbors over. I hosted small gatherings. He clicked to the next slide showing children playing in the pool. I wanted my home to be a place where people could come together, where kids could have fun, where we could all enjoy summer evenings after long work weeks. He paused, letting his words sink in. Unfortunately, those efforts were repeatedly met with complaints. Not from most of you, he gestured to the crowd, but from those who felt that community gathering spaces should be controlled. Barbara shifted uncomfortably as several heads turned in her direction. So I decided to try a different approach, Michael continued, clicking to a new slide showing his partially completed beach resort. I'm creating something unique, a beautiful, peaceful oasis that enhances our neighborhood rather than disrupting it. He clicked through several professional renderings of the completed design, drawing appreciative gasps from the audience. The final vision was tasteful and elegant. Not the tacky nightmare Barbara had described, but a sophisticated outdoor living space with natural elements and thoughtful design. But here's what makes this project special, Michael said, his voice dropping slightly as if sharing a secret. It's not just for me. He clicked to a new slide titled Oakwood Lane Community Gaze. I'm proposing to open my beach resort to the neighborhood one Saturday each month for community gatherings. Children's birthday parties could be hosted at no charge. Our senior residents could enjoy gentle water aerobics classes. We could hold neighborhood cookouts where we actually get to know each other. A buzz of excited conversation swept through the gym. Barbara tried to bang her gavel, but the enthusiasm was building beyond her control. Additionally, Michael continued once the noise had subsided. I've consulted with 2 separate real estate experts who confirmed that unique, well-designed outdoor spaces like this typically increase neighboring property values by 12 to 18%. He slid a folder of documentation toward the board. Their assessments are included for your review. Barbara finally managed to interject. This is all very creative, Mr. Donovan, but it doesn't address the fundamental issue. Your installation violates our community aesthetic guidelines. Michael smiled. Actually, I've reviewed every bylaw and guideline. My design complies with all height restrictions, setback requirements, and noise ordinances. The plantings are drought-resistant and sustainable. The lighting is solar-powered and directed downward to prevent light pollution. He turned to the board. In fact, I'd like to distribute copies of this compliance document to each board member. Derek began handing out professional-looking folders to the increasingly interested board members. Furthermore, Michael added, I've taken the liberty of drafting a proposed addition to our community guidelines that would create a framework for enhanced outdoor living spaces like mine. This would ensure that any similar projects in the future would maintain the high standards we all want for Oakwood Lane. Barbara's face had progressed through several shades of red. This is completely irregular. We can't just change our guidelines based on one person's beach fantasy. The HOA treasurer, a retired accountant named Walter, whom Barbara had always counted as an ally, cleared his throat. Actually, Barbara, we can put proposed amendments to a community vote. It's in the bylaws. He was leafing through Michael's documentation with evident interest, and I have to say, this all seems very thoroughly researched. I move that we put Michael's proposal to a vote, called out Mrs. Jenkins from the back of the room. Both the community day idea and the guidelines amendment. I second. Came several voices at once. Barbara looked around desperately, but the tide had clearly turned. Even her fellow board members appeared captivated by Michael's. The 2 weeks following the HOA meeting transformed not only Michael's backyard, but the entire atmosphere of Oakwood Lane. What had begun as one man's petty revenge against a controlling neighbor had evolved into something remarkable, a genuine community project. Each evening after work, neighbors would drop by to help, bringing tools, plants, and an energy that made the work feel like play. Retired shop teacher Mr. Gonzalez crafted beautiful cedar lounge chairs. The Wember family donated potted tropical flowers from their greenhouse. Even teenagers, typically allergic to neighborhood activities, showed up to help spread sand and string fairy lights. Michael, who had lived on the street for 3 years but knew only a handful of neighbors by name, now found himself at the center of a vibrant social web. He learned that quiet Mrs. Abernathy had once been a landscape designer for luxury hotels. Shy Mr. Peterson revealed an unexpected talent for thatching, creating authentic-looking roofs for the cabanas using YouTube tutorials. It's like the neighborhood was just waiting for permission to be a community again. Derek observed one evening as they sat on the partially completed deck, watching fireflies rise above the newly installed waterfall feature that cleverly masked the pool's filtration system. I had no idea so many people felt stifled, Michael admitted. I thought it was just me. Ryan sipped his beer thoughtfully. Speaking of stifled, has anyone seen Barbara lately? The question hung in the air. Since the HOA meeting, Barbara had been conspicuously absent. Her blinds remained drawn, her immaculate lawn went unmowed for the first time in memory, and her silver Lexus disappeared early each morning, returning after dark. Cynthia tried to drop off some muffins, but no one answered, Michael said. I'm actually starting to worry about her. Derek raised an eyebrow. Seriously? After everything she put you through? Michael shrugged. It can't be easy watching your whole power structure collapse. Besides, the beach resort was never really about hurting Barbara. It was about creating something positive from a negative situation. The day before the grand opening, Michael stood in his driveway directing the delivery of the final element, a custom-built outdoor bar with a thatched roof and bamboo facade. As the delivery truck pulled away, he noticed Barbara's front door open for the first time in days. She emerged hesitantly, dressed in her usual crisp slacks and blouse despite the summer heat, and paused at the edge of her driveway, clearly uncertain. After a moment's hesitation, Michael approached her, crossing the street with a tentative smile. We've missed you at the work parties, he said, keeping his tone light. Barbara's eyes flicked toward his yard, where the afternoon sun illuminated the completed transformation. What had once been an ordinary suburban backyard was now a stunning tropical oasis. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. Crystal clear water sparkled in the lagoon-shaped pool. Elegant cabanas offered shaded retreats, and smooth sand paths wound between lush plantings. It's not what I expected, she admitted, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I'd be happy to give you a tour, Michael offered. The community day is tomorrow, but you could have a preview. Barbara stiffened slightly. I don't think that would be appropriate, given our history. Michael nodded, understanding her reluctance. The invitation stands whenever you're ready. He turned to go and paused. By the way, Walter mentioned you've been a master gardener for years. We could use some expert advice on maintaining the tropical plants through the fall. A flicker of interest crossed her face before she suppressed it. I'm sure you have plenty of help. Different help, Michael corrected gently. Everyone's contributing.